of resources, videos, handouts, personal stories. In fact, one of our own, Hannah, she's the storyboard editor for Alliance Live. She gets to literally just email missionaries around the world in places you're not allowed to talk about and just ask them if they have stories, which she said sometimes is really frustrating because you can't name them. Like, you have to say, like, this international worker in this place, and sometimes they redact it. Like, in the article, I've seen it, they just make it blank because it could expose them, and it could get really intense. We're going to have actually a little bit of that today, just as a heads up, as I talk about the international worker who visited us at the beginning, because we're going to talk about her a little bit. So don't be frustrated when I say that international worker that we had 4 weeks ago, and someone go, you mean? Don't do that, because we're recording. We're going to talk about, very practically, hopefully also theologically, why we do international missions. This is something we've talked about for a while. It's something we've wanted to make everyone as aware of as humanly possible. It just feels like a good moment, and it feels like we have the best resources to do it. It could be a little bit of an overload. Don't be like stressed about it. It's going to be good stuff. But we're just going to talk about what mission looks like around the world. Imagine, if you will, though, as we start, all right? Imagine with me. Imagine Bob Ross painting this scene with happy trees. You've got the sun setting on a rocky outcropping in ancient Israel. And there's nothing around for miles. Jesus is there, talking to his closest friends, and they are still, if they were honest, they're still reeling and confused with both the joy that they feel that Jesus is very much alive and standing in front of them when they thought he was dead. They had moved on, they were done. And then what the Gospel of Matthew describes when they saw Jesus there. And this is what it says verbatim in Matthew 28. They worshipped him, semicolon, but some doubted. I really appreciate the but some doubted part. That's beautiful to me. That's a good encouragement to a lot of us. Despite their doubt, Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you to the very end of the age. And in Matthew, these are Jesus' last words. Now, opposite it. Imagine this. Imagine a young man, late 20s, early 30s, in Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville. Which at the time is only 30 years old, the city of Louisville. In a largely untamed land, reading those words and realizing for the first time the scope of what Jesus had asked the church to do. Like, it kind of really made sense to him for the first time. And who he had asked to do it. And this man, A.B. Simpson, he's the founder of the Christian Missionary Alliance. He didn't know the name of every country by then, right? It was actually a lot that was unexplored. He didn't even have a global population count. He didn't have stats on evangelization like we have today. He couldn't lean on psychology or modern biblical criticism or mass media. In fact, in many ways, all he knew was that there were people in the world who did not have access to the gospel. That's all he knew. They would go 60 to 80 years without once having the opportunity to talk about Jesus with anyone in their life. To knowingly experience his personal goodness, to live in a community with other saints like we get to, and then to experience eternity with him forever. He knew there were people in the world who would never get that chance. And so the Christian Missionary Alliance was born. That was the hope. Not to dominate other cultures, or to get more Anglo people in places where they don't need to be, or to meet like but instead to meet physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of hurting people in the way that only Jesus can do it, right? And as our international worker friend from a couple weeks ago said, in the book of Romans, starting in verse 12, For there is no difference between Jew and Gentile, but the same Lord is Lord of all. And he richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? How? And that's the question we still grapple with today. How can people respond positively to the gospel if they do not have the opportunity to hear it? How can they say yes to Jesus when they've never experienced him or his goodness or any expression of it in any person, right? This is the question that's posed to us. And so if you're like strategically minded, or if you like think 30,000 foot view, maybe your brain is immediately like, so how do we leverage, steward kingdom resources to help the maximum number of people have an opportunity to respond to the kingdom, to kingdom life until Jesus comes back, right? That's like this big overarching question. How do we do it? What's the best way to do it? What's the fastest way to do it? What's the cheapest way to do it? That's where like some of that brain power goes in. And so you can propose a solution in like two ways, right? So you've got the Billy and Franklin Graham way, right? Where we're going to leverage every form of media that we can, and we're going to leverage every resource we can, and we're just going to try to get in as many big name places as humanly possible and preach the gospel, right? And we'll have preparations. And there was a time where that really worked. And we're feeling the ramifications of some of that evangelism methodology. It has not aged well. And in fact, I don't know if you remember this, but shortly before Billy Graham's death, Franklin Graham, his son, he had this push to get his dad on TV in every single home in the country. And they spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to do it. And there was a big push for it, and there were people who were really excited about that. And what they actually began to find, and what we're still finding, I don't know if you've noticed this with people that you talk to, that's actually a way of evangelism that is turning people off, right? It feels actually like an encroachment because their sense is all we have to do is get into the home and someone just has to hear it, right? As long as someone hears that Jesus is real and that he saves, then that's enough. And as long as they heard, then we can finally, I don't know what they, like, get raptured and go to heaven, right? And like we'll be all done. I don't think we should be surprised that that's not actually working, right? That actually people are seeing that as an intrusion. And in fact, they're seeing it as a message with no teeth and no feet or hands attached to it. It's like, cool, you got onto my TV screen. Thank you, right? Like, you're just part of like my news cycle then, basically. And I'm going to forget about you in 30 seconds. Who is going to follow this up, right? And so you see some of the goodness in that, like God's word is not going to return void, but it is moving some people who need the gospel most away from Jesus because those who are talking the talk do not walk the walk, right? It's difficult. So mission then, when we talk about international mission or domestic mission, whatever, as it was when Simpson was sending missionaries with their own caskets, right, to the Congo and Burkina Faso and Vietnam. It's about embedding Jesus' people in communities to live out the fullness of kingdom life in full view of other people, right? Here's the thing. You are never, you're never ever going to hang out with Franklin Graham on a regular basis, right? Not yet. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll get that chance. Who knows? Maybe you don't even know who Franklin Graham is, and that's totally fine. The chances are you're never going to get a chance to do that. We send people out with the understanding that without Jesus, people are missing the key piece of what it means to be human. Casey, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. Like the key piece of what it means to be human. Their capacity to flourish in this world, which, by the way, is different than succeeding. We have to differentiate those two things, right? You can definitely succeed and be successful on very many levels and very much not be flourishing. But to truly flourish by God's design, it is not possible without Jesus. That's a key Christian cornerstone thing that we believe. Because like in the garden in Genesis, we are built for communion with the one who made us. And without that communion, we are not whole. And so we try to find other things to fill that space with. Jesus is the only one who fits into that gap in our experience, right? So when there is that anguish and when there are those unfulfilled longings of our heart, by the way, from which spawn injustice and corruption and violence, that gap can only be filled by Jesus, right? And so we believe that we are drawing people into what we hope is their ultimate goal, which is to worship God forever. Casey, if you want to go to the next slide for me. And this is not the thoughtless or rote view of eternity like I was taught, which is basically that you're going to sit on clouds and sing Brandon Lake and Hillsong for all of eternity, right? That's not a good motivator for missions, and it shouldn't be. Instead, when we talk about worship, it's to glorify God in literally everything that we do, walking alongside him now and even after death in eternity when we're doing stuff then. But if they do not experience Christ himself, they will never know. They will never know what it means to flourish. They will never know what it means to have the longings and desires of their heart fulfilled. They will never know. And so if you're a part of Delco, you know this better than you think you do, I hope, right? We don't practice like the work of listening prayer or of emotional health or of story work, of forgiveness and reconciliation, of caring for the needy and underserved. We don't do that because we're like bored and we don't have anything better to do, you know? Like, I've got an Xbox, so I could just play video games all day if I wanted to. It's great. But that's not going to bring the kingdom into being. When we practice those things, those become the overflow of love, which is simply to want for other people the things you've experienced for yourself. And this, for me, is the sticky part about mission. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, maybe more time than I should. I really don't think that people in the West are that hard-hearted, and I really don't think that people in the West don't have a heart for those in need. My sense that is evolving is that we believe that there are resources that are scarce. One of those being like God's presence, God's love, his capacity to change people, time. Like, we really believe that there is such a scarcity of those things and we live that out. And it becomes almost impossible then to do what should be our natural instinct, which is, oh, I've received this. I would love for someone else to have this, right? Jesus has been so good for me. Why would I not want that same goodness for someone else, right? There's a fear in that. There's a scarcity mindset in that. It's difficult. There's a disconnect there that I continue to be curious about. David Bosch, the missiologist, says it well. Casey, if you would go to the next slide for me. This is his take on this. The church exists in being sent and in building up itself for the sake of mission. It's supposed to be our orientation, our telos, our goal on the earth. To be built up for sure, like to receive the healing you need, to receive the resources you need, and then to be sent out to give those things away generously. It's to reconcile our friends and neighbors and family to Christ the same way we have been, as well as participate however we can in the reconciliation of the rest of the world, right? It's this generous overflow as best as we can. And so when Christ sent his disciples, like in the Gospel of John, saying to them, as I have been sent, as Jesus, Jesus, have been sent, you also have been sent. And if you forgive sins, they'll be forgiven. We don't like to pay attention to that verse. And if you don't, they won't be forgiven. He knows that we minister out of the overflow. There's so many, I think there are 6 different times in the New Testament where Jesus says, you will be forgiven to the extent you forgive others. Which should make all of us be like, uh-oh. Right? Like, that can be a tough thing. The only way to forgive is to experience forgiveness, right? We give away the things that we've received. Or then if you look like in 1 Peter, the mark of the priesthood of the saints is that they have received mercy. But if you've not experienced that mercy, you have no mercy to give to anyone else. It might be pretend. It might actually be like anxiety, like I just want to create peace so that I'm not anxious. But it's probably not going to be true and real mercy. And we have to experience that from the Lord and then give it away, right? Or look at how Paul demonstrates this maturity in 1 Corinthians 9, right? I know I'm going all over the place, but this is just what came to mind. 1 Corinthians 9, this is how he described his own mission. Though I, Paul, am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. So to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews, and to those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. And to those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became, what do you think? To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that they by all means might be saved. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Right? This was Paul's mission philosophy, becoming all things to all people. And so it's a choice. It's a choice that we're given regularly. And so when we talk about missions in the CMA, and we have this philosophy of what it means to serve others, we can think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4. You ready? So this you're going to feel so part of your denomination after this. You ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Casey, if you want to go to the next one. We have one vision for missions. It is all of Jesus for all of the world. Right? Pretty nice, pretty simple, pretty succinct. Oh, go back one. All of Jesus for all the world. We want to be able to give the fullness of Jesus Christ, everything that he has to offer us in abundant life, to every person imaginable, regardless of the context. That's our goal. That's our vision. That's how we state this on the regular. All of Jesus for all the world. And we do that with 2 gospel outcomes. Casey, you will go to the next one. We want gospel access for all people and gospel access from all people. Right? So first of all, there are people who have no gospel access, and we want to give them the capacity to receive it. Then our philosophy is that we would take those who have heard it for the first time and turn them around to become ministers of the gospel. It's the exact same thing that Jesus said to his people. As we've been sent, now you have been sent. Nationals are going to reach their people, right? There's a people group in the world, they're called the Fulani. The Christian Missionary Alliance has been trying to get into this part of Africa for 90 years, I believe. We're pretty sure that in Columbus, we know who the very first Fulani person is to ever respond positively to the gospel in the history of the world. The first time. Isn't that so crazy? Like, they happened to immigrate to Columbus, because Columbus has so many immigrants, and they responded positively to the gospel. They're probably the first convert ever. And that just blows my mind. And so the goal, again, the goal is not to just be like, all right, you did it now. What are you doing? Why are you still here? Like, go find, it's not like that. They're now in community with a group of people, and they are being equipped and trained to figure out, how do we reach more Fulani people? What is the gospel to them, right? By the way, there's a worldwide gospel missions movement where from the South and from the East, there are missionaries coming to America to reach Americans. I don't know if you know that or not, but like from South America and from Southeast Asia and from South Korea, they're like, America needs the gospel, right? And those are the people that we sent our first missionaries to. And so you have 2 options in that moment. You can go, hey, we don't need any help. We helped you. Stop it, right? Thankfully, our posture has been, oh, thank God, right? Like, please come be part of our teams. Please come help us. If the stats hold true, all of us in this room at some point are probably going to go be part of a mega African church. like in 30 years. Like when we're older, those will probably be the only churches that are, there will be very few white people who run churches. It's going to be a blast. You should look forward to it because they worship the best. But this is the goal. Gospel access for and gospel access from. And so, in the world, we have three categories. We have, in this green, we have people with high access. Okay. If you can go back, sorry, Casey. Go back one more. Can you go back a slide, Casey? Sorry. So, I want you to guess, in a high access country, they do this with doors. You can knock on doors. In a high access country, how many doors would you guess you have to knock on before you find somebody who is a disciple of Jesus? What's your guess? 8. Okay. Any other guesses?
Less than 10.
Less than 10? Anybody else?
Are we talking continental U.S.?
So, okay, you can't go to the next slide, Casey. Sorry. So high access countries, America would be like that, Australia, parts of South America. How many doors do you think you'd have to knock on? I'm drawing this out too long. The answer is 6. You can knock on 6 doors at least, or at most, and you will find somebody who can talk to you about Jesus because they're a disciple. Now, low access, which is the yellow. How many doors would you guess you have to knock on to find someone who's a disciple of Jesus in a low access country? Max? 5. That's a good guess. Any other guesses?
36.
36. Anybody else?
8.
Okay, it's a lot higher than you think that it probably is.
5,000?
It's 500. 500 doors. Okay?
Hey, different than 6.
Yep. Now here's the big one. This is the one that when I was sitting through this training, something shifted in me. No access in the red. How many doors do you think you have to knock on to find somebody in a no-access country? What do you think, Max?
1,000?
1,000? That's a good guess. Brandon, did you have a guess you were going to whisper to him?
Yeah.
What?
You get shot for asking.
That's actually, that could be true. Yeah, that could 100% be true. There is a number for this.
Millions.
50,000?
30,000. 30,000 doors. So I want you to imagine the city of Delaware where there was one door you could knock on in the whole city and find someone who is a disciple of Jesus. One door.
Which door?
We don't. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a great question. I don't know, right? It's more like 1.5, but it's one door and no gospel access in countries where there's no gospel access. Just so you know, for international missions for the Alliance, 80% of our missionaries are in that red zone. So we send almost everybody. There was a huge movement in the 80s where we actually picked up shop from almost every country we were in that's not one of those red countries. And this is now where they live, in the hardest places, right? I love it. We have 3 strategic themes in terms of our ministry. This is what our hope for. Casey, if you want to go to the next slide for me. They are serving communities. This is what our missionaries are trained to do. Serving communities, multiplying church networks, and developing people. Serving communities, usually they have a job. They have a capacity to sit in and with people. They know what's happening in their town and in their city. And they are able to create change in that way. So I just listened to a testimony from a couple that are getting ready to go to Thailand. The Lord laid it on their heart. They are providing ESL for food truck workers. So what that means is they have an opportunity to have a relationship with food truck workers through ESL, through the means of saying, this will definitely get you better revenue, right? There are people who come and visit Thailand all the time because it's cheap. And if you can communicate with them, you will certainly get more business. So they're teaching them ESL while also developing a relationship with them, right? Multiplying church networks is one of them. There is a church planting arm of this. That some of that is like the more natural ministry or like ministerial ministry that you get trained for. Whether that's underground or whether that's very obvious, that's where people are. And then we have developing people. This is the most obvious in terms of like places where there's high levels of sex trafficking, or there's places where people are being taken advantage of regularly. But the goal is that they would create networks in which they have services to provide for people. So again, our international worker who came a couple of weeks ago, she's a nurse who also helps run a community center. So two things that meet very practical needs, and she's having regular gospel conversations with the people that she interacts with there, right? And that's the goal. And this is what they're trained to do. And we do those three things. So remember, 1, 2, 3, 4. We do those three things through 4 structures. Casey, if you want to go to the next slide for me. We have a ministry called Envision, which is this farthest right one. Envision is for short-term trips, right? So we actually have Envision sites in a ton of countries, and in the U.S., actually. We have one in New York and Chicago and Cleveland. Cleveland's actually one of our best Envision sites, which is really fun. In Cleveland, this is a fun story. In Cleveland, there are so many abandoned houses that they eventually went to City Hall, and they're like, what do you want to do with these? And the city of Cleveland basically said, what do you want to do with these? They started selling them these abandoned houses for $1. $1 a piece. They've renovated a ton of them and have been able to then help people who cannot afford to find housing come and live in these houses. In our economy, buying a house for $1 is a story you can tell forever, right? Like, that's so cool. But we also have them in places like Israel. We have them in places like Bangkok. We have them in places in Jordan, Envision sites that you can go for short-term trips and create relationship. This would be kind of the classic short-term trip model, but the people who work there live there, right? And so you get to come, you get to do service, you get to hang out, but you're not gonna, you can take however many Facebook photos you want, but then you go home, right? The second one, next to the two hands, that's called Comma, and that is called Compassion and Mercy Associates. That's our disaster relief arm. So, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there were hurricanes that came through Florida and parts of the country. Comma is actually, alongside the Red Cross, they're one of the first people on the ground to help provide relief. And so a lot of our Alliance churches support Comma, give donations, and they help recruit the local church in that area to provide relief for people who are experiencing intense disaster ramifications, right? So the local church in Florida is well known right now in certain areas because we actually have a ton of Alliance churches in Florida, and they were the primary arm of Comma coming and providing relief to people. Their churches are open up, people are sleeping in them, like it's the real deal. It's very fun. They do a great job. Access, which is that X with the, I don't know what that is, like the Zorro slash through it. That's kind of traditional pastoral ministry. You're going to plant a church or provide ministry. Maybe it's counseling, but you're going overseas basically to be a pastor of locals to then develop them into being able to steward their own ministry. So there's a couple named the Stutlers. They were actually our first missionaries. You get it, girl. They were our first missionaries here at Delco. They started a church planting ministry in Guadalajara, Mexico. We were going to go visit them before COVID happened. We were going to go see them. That's such a bummer. They've been ministering faithfully for 35 years. And now they've raised up, what was the last number? 9 or 10 locals who are just as good at church planting, if not better than they are. And the Stutlers, this year, they're retiring. They're like, we did it. We did the thing. We did what we needed to do. We're going home. And so they'll come and live in Kentucky. But that's the whole goal. They just ministered faithfully and they saw fruit about 15 years in. And that's when stuff really started to take off, which you can imagine doing anything for 15 years. And then Marketplace Ministries is that, I did it backwards. Marketplace Ministries is the far right, Envision is this one. Nope, I did all of this wrong. You ready? The hands are Comma, the 2 M's are Marketplace Ministries. I got it. The X is Access, because that's an X in it, for them. And then that one's Envision on the far side. Okay, sorry. So Marketplace Ministries are where you do have traditional jobs. Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a nurse, maybe you teach English, and you live in a place and you basically work as a part-time minister of the gospel there. Maybe you're planting churches, but that is your primary role, is doing your job and being part of the community. So this is a fun fact. We have a world-ranked judo champion who works for Marketplace, who works with Marketplace Ministries. His full-time work is beating the crap out of people and teaching them judo, and then he's also basically a pastor on the side. And I've heard he is one of the coolest human beings. He's also a professional scuba diver. I don't know, the man of mystery, those commercials. That's who I imagine when people talk about him. I've just heard he's super cool. But that's his thing. You take those jobs overseas, they're very valuable, and it creates opportunities for you to develop relationships and share the gospel. That's the whole thing. This is how the Modern Alliance has structured itself from A.B. Simpson in the early 1800s, reading Matthew 28. This is what we do now. And I don't know if he ever would have thought, as he was reading Matthew 28, that someday in that long line of inheritance, there would be a professional judo champion who was also going to be like right there with him, because they didn't even know what judo is. But that's how crazy our world is, and that's how crazy the kingdom is. Like, it's so fun to imagine a world where any of our skills can be leveraged for the gospel. Like, that's exactly what Jesus does for us. And so we, the local church, we get to support these ministries in ways that you've seen, right? Like, we invite missionaries to come and they speak and we hang out with them. I want to provide for you 4 ways that you can support international missions as we continue to make it a priority and as we continue to be the Christian and Missionary Alliance. The first one you could probably guess. The first way you can support missions is through prayer, right? Perhaps the most important and most underestimated, right? All of our missionaries, every single time, without fail, I have asked them, how can we support you? Literally, they will say the very first thing is prayer. Like, please pray for us. And I was like, can I just write you a check? And they're like, no, please keep us on your mind and pray for us. Like, dang it, okay. They would say that is their first defense and their first hope is prayer, interceding for them. A.B. Simpson, when he was founding the Christian and Missionary Alliance, this was his philosophy. Prayer is the mighty engine that is to move the missionary work, right? It is to ask God to say, please do more. Please help these families. Please move in these places, right? We have to pray. And that's why we regularly have updates in our emails about how the missionaries that we support are doing. That's why we regularly have them. That's why we always make it a priority to pray over them. Prayer is the mighty engine that moves these things forward. The second thing you can do, Casey, if you want to go to the next slide. The second thing we do is we build relationships, right? It doesn't mean you're going to become best friends with an international worker, okay? Maybe you will. That would be awesome. But listen, if you receive a newsletter from any of these folks through email or whatever, you are on their mind, right? It is real. And they are then on your mind. They know about you in some way. And more importantly, that prompts you to consider what it means to be in relationship with them, to pray for them. When we do get to see them, we continue to hear the work of the Lord in these other countries that they're ministering in. By the way, if you do get a chance to hang out with them, they would be, and I don't know if you've experienced this, they are just as interested in hearing what the Lord is doing in Delaware as you are. Like, what is the Lord doing in Paraguay? And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. Same answer we would give, like, oh, it's really great. What's the Lord doing in Delaware? And then you go, I don't know. Why are you asking? I'm not, you know what I mean? They want to know because they've oriented their whole lives around the work of mission. They know that the Lord is at work. They have not forgotten it when we've often forgotten it, right? So we can pray and we can invest, we can care, we can share with them, we can do Zoom calls, we can send them books, we can give them money, we can do all the things. And then they too, they pray for us. The Stutlers, once a year, they ask us, like, what do you want us to pray for Delco in the coming year? And I always want to be like, aren't you guys busy? Like, you planted 4 churches last year. Like, I'm tired just listening to your stories. And they're like, no, we really want to know how we can pray for Delco. They invest, they inform, they cast vision for what's happening across the world, right? That is the development of a relationship. And then the third thing, Casey, if you want to go to the next slide. The third thing is to learn. We can do whatever we want with this. Learning develops a heart for a place, right? It's to stay informed. You don't have to be an expert on any of these countries. You don't have to get their mail or get their newspaper because you probably can't understand it. But the practice of learning gives you context for prayer in their lives, right? When you learn about these places. It might also mean, by the way, like with Envision sites, you have an unlimited opportunity to go visit any of these places. Like any of these missionaries will host you. One of my favorite things that's happening in the Dominican is that the Nutters, Brandon and they bought a coffee shop that has bunks on the second floor. And so you can go for a week, learn to be a barista, hang out with them, and just meet all of their friends who come into their coffee shop. That's a normal thing for them. They love hosting people. It's really fun for them. I mean, that's great. And so then we can go on short-term trips. We can pray for their projects. We can participate in what they're doing as they educate and connect with us, right? As we just continue to learn about what the Lord is doing in those places, what's happening in the news. And then the final thing, the more traditional thing, in case you want to go to the next slide, long-term relationships do often go towards not just praying for their teams, but it is for financial support, right? They need it just as much as any of us do, just as much as Delco does. Our missionaries are funded both by the Alliance through what's called the Great Commission Fund and by their own supporters. I believe it's like 60-40, but I need to check that now. And so when we give to missionaries specifically, that meets a need. And when we give to the GCF as a whole, that meets a more broad need. They can use that money as they need to. It not only allows them to do their work well,